Alright, this video is a tutorial on how to draw a realistic eye. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to draw the outside part of the eye. Now you need to make sure that you get the shape right, and this isn't necessarily easy. The first time you do it may not be exactly right, you may have to do some adjusting. So the best way to describe the outside shape of the eye is that it's like an almond. So it's a little bit more rounded on one side, a little bit pointed on the other. Now everybody's eyes are a little bit different shape. We're just going to do kind of a general eye here. So I'm using kind of sketchy lines. Those are called gesture lines to try to get it to be what I want it to be, right? So if I need to make any adjustments, I can. Alright, so next I'm going to separate the membrane or the tear duct from the rest of the eye. So I'm just going to take and separate that using a line. And then I'm going to add the watermark here, the water line, or the tear line. I don't know what it's called, but it really shows the thickness of the eyelid right there. I'm just erasing, cleaning up some of my sketchy lines. Okay. So I have the basic shape of the eye. I don't know, it looks a little droopy over here. Looking at it, I might want to make a little bit of an adjustment before I begin. It's better to adjust things if you don't like how it looks right now before we get all the shading and the details and stuff. It's easier to erase and adjust. So get the shape right so you feel good about what you're looking at, okay? Alright, so next we need to put in where our iris is. Now this is a common place where people make a mistake. The iris is actually a perfect circle, although it's cut off. It's cut off by our top eyelid most of the time. We also need to look at the size. It really takes up, like if we are going to divide our white space up, it takes up about half of that white space. So I have like a fourth over here, a fourth over here, and the middle. So if we divide our eye space into 4 sections, it's taking up 2 of those sections. So I'm actually going to draw a perfect circle, or try to draw a perfect circle that even extends outside the eye for pupil placement. Okay, so our pupil needs to be in the center of this iris. And so that's another mistake that people make. They don't put it in the center, and then their eye looks off for some reason. And they can't figure out, why does it look off? So I'm going to place my pupil right there in the center. I'm also going to have a little area that's going to have a reflection. So now that I have this drawn, I don't need this top part anymore. So I'm going to erase that. Anything that extends outside of my eye needs to go away. Alright, so the next line I'm going to draw is the top eyelid. Everybody's top eyelid looks a little bit different, but really it's a line that kind of contours the outside of the eye and kind of extends and then kind of just vanishes here. Now you can draw a small line underneath, but keep it very minimal. Okay, we don't want that to just make your eye look old and sad and, you know, tired. So those are the main lines that we're going to draw. Now the next part is shading. So I always start shading in the center, the darkest spot, the pupil, because it's just, I know what it is. It's very, it's very easy, cut and dry, easy to just take a shape and shade it in. I'm not shading in my reflection spot though. So I'm trying to get that dark, trying to get it as dark as I can possibly get it, or a 7 on the value scale. All right, so next I'm going to look at my iris. So typically an iris is darker on the outside and then it fades as it goes towards the pupil. And then it might get a little bit darker again as it goes towards the pupil. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start out dark and then fade it. And I'm going to have to do that all the way around my iris. And I have some sketchy lines that are around my iris from whenever I first drew it. So I'm going to clean those up with my eraser. All right, so that looks pretty good. So my next step is to add what I call the starburst effect. So you have little flecks of color inside of your eyes, inside of your iris, and they're very irregular, but they stem from your pupil. So I'm going to make these lines that are a little bit kind of haphazard. Some are thicker, some are thin. And that'll give the kind of that starburst effect of those little flecks of color. All right, moving out, I'm going to look at the white part of my eye. Now, a lot of people forget that they need to shade that part, and that makes their eye look really flat. And so you got to be making sure that we do add a little bit of shading, not nearly as much as what we did here, but a little bit on the outside of the iris, and it should fade fairly quickly. Or not the iris, the eye, I'm sorry, the white part of your eye. Even down here where it kind of hits that water line. So that's starting to give a little bit of dimension to our eyeball, so it doesn't look like it's flat. I'm going to build up my shading over here in the corner where the eyelids are kind of close together. Another thing I'm going to do is shade right above the top of my eyelid. So since it's on top of my eyeball, it actually is going to cast a shadow. And most of the time the light is above us, making that shadow a little bit stronger. So what I've done is just really add some shading, just slight shading all the way around to give that illusion of 3 dimensions. I'm going to up this one a little bit over here. So now that we shaded that, this kind of looks silly because it's not shaded. So for the tear duct, I'm going to just shade on the outside, and then as it goes towards the center, it's going to fade out. All right, the last thing to shade before we add some eyelashes is going to be where our eyelid is. So I'm going to first shade where that line is, and then I'm going to fade it out as it goes down towards the eye. So something like that works. You can shade a little bit above it too, because really that's kind of like a fold in the skin. So if we shade a little bit above it, that helps. All right, so I can do a little bit of shading under my eye, but I got to be very careful. If I do too much shading, then I'm going to add the bag under your eye effect. I am going to shade just slightly under this line here, and then maybe just a little bit here. All right, so now I can add eyelashes. People have a tendency to do weird things whenever it comes to eyelashes. And one thing that you need to remember is that they're irregular, meaning they don't all go in the same direction. They're not all the same length. So, and they all kind of angle out towards the outside part of the eye. I'm going to bring my eyelashes all the way to that point. Now that was just one layer. On the top, I typically go back and add a second thicker layer because our eyelashes on the top are a little bit thicker. Now the bottom, the eyelashes are thinner, but they're still irregular. And they're gonna meet our top eyelashes in the corner. Alright, so I didn't leave a whole lot of room on my paper for an eyebrow. I can put a part of my eyebrow on here, but it's gonna arc up. So whenever I do eyebrows, I usually kind of shade in a shape. The only part that you're going to be able to see is probably going to be that. I first do a little bit of shading, and then I'll go in and add a few hairs to make it look like the hair texture that an eyebrow has. So the rest of it's going to extend up out of the page. Alright, that's how to draw an eye.